Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast, our episode today on play. We have a special guest joining us today, Dr. Brooke Buckley, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Henry Ford Wyandotte Hospital, who used to be the Division Chief of General Surgery and the Associate Chair of the Surgery Department at Anne Arundel Medical Center in Annapolis, Maryland. Welcome, Brooke.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to start today's episode with a quote, which I just love, by George Bernard Shaw. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Our intention today is twofold: to talk a little bit about how mindfulness is integral to play, and to inspire all of you and ourselves to bring more play into our lives. We hope that you will discover that play is an important source of relaxation and stimulation for adults. It relieves stress, it adds joy, it adds oodles of health benefits, brain function, wards off depression. It's also a productivity tool and can improve relationships and connection.
Our takeaways for today's episode is that the aspect of mindfulness, specifically presence, letting go, non-judgment, and curiosity, will help you play well. And play oftentimes takes some permission giving to oneself to let go and actually be in the moment. We'll also share some tools and creative ways to help you bring more play into your day. I wanted to start off with the definition of play as defined by Webster's Dictionary. Play refers to activities that are done especially by children for fun or enjoyment. And I'm adding in that play is not just for children, it's for people of all ages with tremendous benefits that we'll touch upon today.
So, Brooke, we were hoping you could introduce yourself and share a little bit about your interest and background in play.
Thank you. Yeah, so play is one of those things that we all know how to do as children. And just like every other hard driving adult, I largely had forgotten how to play. But somewhere along the way, in trying to find myself, and in large part in this pandemic experience, trying to find ways to reconnect, play became even more an essential sort of piece of my framework for wellness and health. I should add that I have 3 little boys. So being the mother of an 8-year-old and 2 6-year-olds also adds to the awareness of play, and watching through my children, but also in connecting with my family. But it really is one of those elements where, for me, I recognized that I needed to slow down, I needed to connect, and I needed to figure out how to take care of my physical self. And mindfulness per se, or yoga, were things that I was struggling to connect with, struggling to give myself permission to learn that body of work. And what really connected for me on play is that it's something that I know how to do. It's something that I don't tend to give myself permission, as you've already alluded to do, but it's something that I know how to do. And so that's really where that journey started, as a general surgeon and a hospital administrator and a busy working mom. Trying to find a tool that I connected with is where this journey really began.
I'm really curious about this thought that you think you know how to play. I'm not judging that, but as you said that, I thought, do I know how to play? And I probably do as a pediatrician, and I even teach kids yoga, but I immediately went to judgment of myself there that I do not know how to play. I think because it involves discomfort. And for me, it's a little bit like dancing, which is also, it's that letting go. And so it's just really interesting that yoga for me would be much more accessible as a way to be present and in the moment than play.
So I love that. I think probably that initial reaction is very, very common. And I've tried to speak to play to various audiences, largely physician audiences. And there's that very heavy moment where I sort of hold my breath to see if it connects with anyone. And Stewart Brown is a physician who's written extensively on play. And he describes the scene of a person throwing a ball with a dog, and the dog's exuberance and jumping and chasing sticks and balls, and sort of capturing that moment as that we all recognize play, if you take that as play. And then further goes on to define that getting lost in the doing, that sort of moving your body, moving yourself in a direction that is purposeless, but is full of meaning in other ways almost. And so I could connect to that. I've recognized when I've played or when I've been lost in the moment and been fully absorbed. Again, children have a way, or dogs have a way of getting you in those moments. But then figuring out how you get back to connecting to, can I make myself do that, for instance? Can I get into that space purposefully or intentionally, or is that something that has to come and find me? It was really sort of the path to understanding play as a accessible tool.
I think the dogs or the animals is a real easy way. And for me, toddlers, like I can immediately tap into play with toddlers. And so part of it may be getting yourself in that environment or with people who immediately trigger that mindset that it's okay to play, and you remember how to do it, and then borrowing that for other settings where maybe it doesn't come as naturally.
Yes, and so what's really interesting about the body of work around play is that many people have tried to describe different personalities of play. And, again, Stewart Brown has a framework that is helpful. David Elkind also writes on play. But the personalities around creativity, or around athletics, or around storytelling or directing, there's various ways, jokesters. And so then again, sort of diving into that a little bit, I think we all know the patriarch in our family who tells all kinds of stories that don't necessarily connect to what our reality of our situation has been. The movie Big Fish, I love for that sort of tale. And people almost get frustrated at the jokesters at work, if you will. We had a man at one of my last jobs who replicated exactly his ID backwards. So it was the back of his head and his name in reverse on the backside of his badge. And identifying that we all do quirky little things, even doodling, and that those are our play spaces potentially. Those are places that we go when we allow ourselves to relax, and then permitting more space for that. So for those of you that know me and or followed me on my social media, I draw a lot. And that was something that I didn't do for almost 20 years, but started to create space to what I call doodle. And some of my doodles get fairly intricate and fairly involved, but it's a way that I can express myself that's natural to me, and even giving myself 10 or 15 minutes to start that process has been a intentional journey towards connecting with the way that I feel comfortable playing, if you will, opening that creative space.
And I think you alluded to two things there that are sort of mindful, the intentional piece, and then having the spaciousness to do it. And both of those are components of mindfulness that we talk about a lot on the podcast. So I'm curious, Oftentimes, it's interesting that this even came up as a question to ask you around play as a tool, right? Around productivity and relationship building. And now I want to talk about it, and yet part of me doesn't want to talk about it because I'm thinking, well, it's supposed to be purposeless. And if there's value in it, even if it has no purpose. And yet I think as adults, we also always want it to have a purpose, to give ourselves permission. But I'm curious as to thoughts on it as a tool, either for productivity or relationships or in healthcare, with the idea that it might be just the thing that allows us to tap into it, and then maybe we can carry it other places where it also has benefits.
No, I love this topic, right? Especially now as we're looking at burned out workforces and sort of being stuck, if you will. And so the I guess psychological concept around functional fixedness, or that space where we've trained our brains how to get to answers. School is kind of all about a rigid process to know how to solve problems. Yet, if we think about creative solutions and we think about innovation and startups and all these places that might get us out of problems like burnout or climate change, or how do we feed the world? You need really creative and agile solutions. And I love this one experiment with adults, and having been actually walked through this, it's so eye-opening. We came to a conference and there were a bunch of Legos in the middle of the table. And of the 80 some people that were there, maybe one or two people started randomly building stuff with their Legos, but the other 78 of us diligently and thoughtfully sat there and just looked at the Legos and mostly kept to ourselves about, well, that's odd, I wonder why those are there. And so through the course of the program, ultimately they had us design with those pieces the solutions. And so you couldn't use words, you had to design with the structures how you would answer the problems we were being asked about. But one of the pieces that they pointed out was how diligent we all were in following rules that didn't exist, right? And so we all in our minds had created this space where clearly there must be a purpose that I don't understand, and I'm not to touch these until given permission to touch. But yet there were no such rules. And there were this very small number of people who actually allowed themselves that space. Another piece to sort of connect to that I really love is that you can't get to a future that you can't imagine. That the first part of getting to a big dream or a big goal is to be able to envision what that might look like. And if we're so stuck in our way of thinking that we can't see a hat for anything other than a hat to put on your head, or those kinds of things, how on earth can we envision a world where healthcare workers aren't burnt out, where climate change isn't our inevitable future? Those kinds of things that to really push into those spaces that feel childish, that feel childlike. And I guess the research would show that by about age 5 that we abandon that kind of willingness to touch and feel and build. And who in the room is an artist? And everybody's hand pops up in preschool, but in 3rd grade, everybody sits there with their hands as far under their chairs as possible, to not be exposed to something other than what we feel confident that we can define to others. And so I think that it really just opens that space, whether it's relationships or work, to be able to imagine and to create and to build something bigger.
I think that's true. You brought up the hat, and I was just thinking kids will take a hat and use it for anything and everything. My children's nursery school, and my youngest is now 16, has this really cool red tower that's been there forever. And the nursery school was built as a WPA project in like the 30s. And they've always had a tower, which we rebuilt when our kids were there. And now they're tearing down the tower over Christmas break. And someone wrote this beautiful piece about all the things and all the imaginative play that this tower has been used for. And, it's a castle, and it's a police station, and it's Hogwarts, and it's potion making, and it's, and this is the idea that to us, it's a red tower. And to the children, it has this whole other meaning and ideas. And that's really what play allows us to see. And yet for the adults who've tapped out of play, it is literally a red tower.
No, it really connects. And I think also something that I've identified is there's sort of this paralysis when you think of I'm going to go do something creative, right? That just the weight of being creative or athletic or any of these things. And I think that many of us will use tools like a yoga or a dance class or a organized sport to put guardrails, if you will, around that gigantic space of imagination. And then it allows you to move forward. And so we were talking before we started recording around prompts. And I think that the prompts or the adult coloring books or, let's show up to the dog park because there's a fence and a place for the dogs to go. That the giving yourself the permission to use prompts to find where your space is, where your comfort zone is a really helpful kind of first step into creating some of that space.
You had mentioned that we oftentimes adhere to rules that actually don't exist, or that we create rules. And that came up in one of our earlier podcasts around mindfulness and how mindfulness can actually help us see when we are doing that to ourselves. And so with regards to play, I think that you're bringing up excellent points about having guardrails that kind of serve as physical rules sometimes, and then other times there can be the absence of rules. So there's a spectrum of play in it of itself as well.
No, I think that's for me, that starts to really describe the balance and the journey. And I'm someone who has spent my whole life with destinations and starting lines, and trying to get comfortable in the balance has been a really huge challenge. And so when I think of guardrails, I think of as rigid as medical school, right? It's like all the specifics. This is the date of the test. This is how this goes. This is the number of questions, and wanting to have all those answers. But yet complete absence of rules, the exact opposite doesn't also have to be true. And so I think when we start to give ourselves permission and space, we feel more comfortable, but we feel comfortable having all of these rules. But the farther you can get away from that and give yourself permission. And actually just yesterday I was drawing and it came to mind that I always start with the eyes. And so many times I'll take a page and I just draw an eyeball and it takes off from there, which I hadn't really thought about it, but I've noticed that that's my comfort zone. That if I start with an eye, I can make the rest of the page show up. But if I start with, I'm going to draw a narwhal and it's going to be swimming in the ocean under, I just totally freeze and walk away and go do something else. And so I think sometimes we don't even recognize it, but it's identifying that place where you're comfortable to toe in the water, even if it's just setting your watch for 15 minutes and giving yourself the permission of 15 unscripted minutes. But whatever that first step is, tends to be that which is helpful to jump into that space.
I can see for me, my first step is always nature. So for me, I can play in the snow, I can play at the beach, I can play in a beautiful park, like immediately I can tap into it. So it's funny, it's not an eyeball. The paper would create tension for me. So it's very interesting knowing yourself and taking that time to think about what it is that allows you to play.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny, if I can share a little story. So I had diverged in high school. I was either going to go to art school or into medical school. And so I just walked away from art completely. Again, that all or none thinking. And when my son was in preschool, they started taking lunches, and one of the moms was putting notes in the lunchbox. And my immediate panic around the notes in the lunchbox was, I'm a working mom, I don't have time for this. And then once I got done shaming myself, I jumped to, I'm not smart enough to write something every day of the year to fill your lunchbox with notes. And then I kind of jumped the progression to year 4, you don't even know how to read. And so it doesn't matter what I write because you won't be able to read it anyway. And then I finally got to somewhere a little bit more productive around what can I do? And what I knew that I could do was to make a little card like this big and draw a picture on it. And so this sort of drawing every night with my boys started out from the sort of panic moment about lunchbox notes that I didn't feel worthy of, to a, gosh, to do art doesn't mean I have to be Picasso. It just means I need to put a pen in my hand and a paper, and make it move. And so it's really turned into this sort of beautiful sort of tradition and a thing that we do, and a meditative kind of freeness. So it wasn't something that I tried to make happen. It kind of showed up by accident, but really has been deeply enriching for my life, especially in all of the changes in COVID. So
you mentioned art being meditative, and I wanted to talk a little bit about mindfulness and play, and why mindfulness helps and how they're related. Do you want to reflect on that, Niching?
Yeah, so reminding everyone that mindfulness is paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment. And a shortcut to that definition is allowing the mind and the body to be in the same place at the same time. And as we're talking about play, mindfulness is inherently built into play. And if you watch children, if you watch animals, their minds and their bodies are oftentimes at the same place at the same time, especially when they're playing. And so I think that intrinsically, as part of the process of play, there's an automaticity of mindfulness embedded within it.
And I think as adults, we have to be intentional about it. So when your kids are playing, we're often sitting there trying to play, but also doing all these other things. And so unlike children and animals, I think adults play has to be not only mindful, but intentionally mindful.
And if I can draw one more connection here too. So a lot of the conversation around sort of best practices at work, if you will, involve flow. And flow is that space between boredom and anxiety where you lose yourself and you lose time and you're connected and doing something that is working well for you, right? And moving in that space. And play probably is, the ultimate flow. And, again, connecting that back to places where we are really aligned with our purpose and aligned with our journey. It all sort of melts for me in that same moment. And, giving it a word like play, is an easy way to define it. But it's truly that moment where everything gels together.
And I wonder for some people if flow is even more accessible than play. Like we know where we have flow or we know where we've found it. And so using that as a bridge or a stepladder to get back into a little bit more play because we can see what works for us. As again, it's like a trapdoor into something where we can maybe let go of judgment and be more present.
I love that. And as you take that then and connect that another step to the personalities, right? So if I know where I flow, what style is that in? And are there other things that I could do that are similar to that style, that really start to look like that broader body of play and permission around that kind of behavior?
That's something I hadn't really thought of until we started talking, which is that I had a vision that play is play, but we all play differently. And if you think about children, they all play differently. They play differently chronologically. As a pediatrician, I'm always thinking developmentally. They play differently at different ages, but also sexes play differently. And each child, even of all three boys of yours and all three boys of mine, play differently. And so that we can also give ourselves permission to play differently. And I'm betting that all three of us play differently.
Absolutely. And I think of my play as creative and drawing. But I've also recognized that I like to tell stories, and that diving into that and giving myself permission into the storytelling, that's not just a silly waste of time, but that's an outlet of self-expression, has been just a helpful tool, again, to allow just more of that intentionality into spaces I wouldn't normally go as a responsible adult. Trying to break down responsible adults into a more functional definition.
So this word responsible, I think for so many physicians is almost a bad word. Like we are so addicted to being responsible that it's really hard for us to step out of responsibility. I think it takes permission, but even more than permission, like almost direct instruction. You have to step out of responsibility and try it for this period of time. So I think it would be a great time to talk about how we play. It sounds like you play through art and I play through nature. And I'm thinking for me, play really is like tactile and in the snow and in the sand. It's interesting because my kids were in nursery school. I never liked the Play-Doh table or the water table, but I play with my toes in the sand and my toes in the water and my fingers in the snow. So it's interesting that our brain just draws these lines. So Nicheng, where do you play?
So when I'm by myself, I create things with beads, sometimes painting, sometimes coloring, sometimes embroidery. And more recently, I just participated in the laughter yoga session that was taught by Dr. Yvonne for Mindful Healthcare Collective. And that was definitely a form of play. In the near future, my eldest daughter and I have decided that we're going to take up ukulele lessons together. So that's going to be my outlet for play. And as we're talking retrospectively, I think music in some form has been my form of play, whether it be just picking up some sheet music and playing on the piano or learning the cello with my eldest. We had a hot minute where we tried to learn the cello together. But I think playing with music has been one of my foundational outlets. And then also with literally playing with my kids. So I have a 3.5-year-old and a 12-year-old. And we most recently just went to the beach a couple of times this past Thanksgiving break. And my youngest flew a kite for the first time. So that was a beautiful witnessing of beginner's mind in experiencing flying a kite again through her eyes and helping her achieve the flight, the height of the kite, if you will. Playing card games and board games with my kids is always fun. And then something as easy as kicking around a ball or peppering with a volleyball with my eldest, who is really into volleyball right now. And then some more kind of other forms of play have been to karaoke with friends, where there's an absolute suspension of judgment and there's a lot of need to let go. And then games such as Heads Up, Charades, Taboo, Cards Against Humanities all generate belly laughs. So those are some of the ways that I play.
I have an interesting thought here, which is, and this is perhaps just a judgment, but it sounds to me like play is fairly easy for you. Maybe you don't call it play, but that you play a lot. And you just came up with this huge list. And I was thinking like, so is it easy for you or is it hard? Is it something you've been intentional about?
You know, I never thought about that question about whether play was hard for me or not. I think because of my 3.5-year-old, she kind of keeps me in that space, whether or not I like it. And so I'd like to be more intentional about creative outlets and play for myself. And hopefully taking up ukulele lessons will become the intentional, mindful playtime activity with my eldest. But yeah, you're right. I don't think that play is necessarily difficult for me to access.
Do you
Though
think
there
of
are
it as
definitely
play when you think about all those things you listed, or are you thinking about it because we're talking about it as play? Or are they just things that you do? I actually think that the wording and the language may be the key to our brain doing it and actually playing. Because if I don't use the word play, I can think of lots of spaces in which I play, but I don't call it that. And so I'm having this thought about the word play and whether that's part of this challenge that some people have around play or the permission around it.
Yeah, the label of play is an interesting one. And those activities, I think, got lumped into the bucket of play because we're talking about it. But like prior to this discussion with Brooke, I probably wouldn't have intentionally labeled it as play, simply because I hadn't thought about it that way. So I think that for our listeners, thinking about like what you already do that could be already quite playful, and that you do probably already play in some respects.
Yeah, no, I just was going to say, I think that's why this body of work is so compelling to me. Is it's, taken us a while to kind of circle to that connection. It's very hard to articulate, right? That as an adult, you should play. And what do you mean? I'm an adult. I don't play. That's not a thing I do. Yet we probably can list off 5 or 10 or 15 things. And we know scientifically that play connects to all this health and wellness and, positive mental agility and enhanced relationships and those kinds of things. And so if we can draw that connection across what we like to do, what we're good at, extra places we could go that we are aligned with and just don't realize it, we can then immediately have the scientific body of work that says it actually works. It's good. It's the real deal. And I think especially now when so many people are looking for productive self-soothing, looking for ways to manage their hearts and their minds in all of this disruption, that those acts that we already sort of go towards, that we can connect to a positive way to self-soothe, to grow, to manage our behaviors when we're trying to drift in other places. And those small steps of permission is why the whole body of work around play to me is just so compelling. And I think, Jesse, you're right. Finding the right language to make it connect is really the biggest trick, and a really interesting piece of this work.
Any other tips about how people can incorporate play into their lives or overcome the hardness perhaps of play, or if they aren't mindful yet, bringing in being able to show up for play mindfully?
Yeah, so I think, it's the small steps, and it's the permission for the thing you can't say no to. I wanted to become a walker, to get into shape. And then I had a person challenge me to just put on shoes. I had to put on appropriate walking shoes, like not even to walk, just to put the shoes on. And it took me a couple of weeks to give myself permission to put on shoes because I thought it was too silly and too, frivolous. But then I, kind of got to the place where I was thinking, well, if I'm not even willing to do that, I can't honestly be serious about wanting to get into shape. And so I think it's, that first piece of just breaking it down into something so small that you can't say no to it. And then also giving yourself a little bit of permission to dream about where you might go if you gave yourself that permission. Right? I want to run a marathon, or painting for my wall, or open an Etsy shop, or play on a competitive sports team, or whatever the thing is. But I love it sort of as a math equation, because I can think of all the things I do that are totally unhealthy, like the extra helping of dessert last night, and and the binge watching of TV and those kinds of things. But trying to flip that equation to just a little bit more healthy, positive things, a little bit more towards hope, and a little bit farther away from, a little bit less of the things that aren't consistent with who I really want to be, is how I've tried to tilt the equation over time. And that, the small steps make the journey, is just such a hard concept to get your brain around. But as we start to take those journeys, we start to really walk ourselves in that right direction.
Two thoughts that pop to mind there is the dream, and like play can allow you to dream. And we do give we dream every night. So it's kind of dreaming in the day. Where could it get you? And the hope involved in play. And then the health piece of it too is something we haven't talked about, but I know there's research that is good for you. And so I think for some of us who it just as inspiration to do more of it, like it's good for your health and it's fun. And so why wouldn't you do more of it rather than, I actually like broccoli, but it's not that it's better than eating broccoli, and so doing something that's fun and good for your health, why not try to bring a little bit more of that in if we can just be a bit more intentional about it. Any
Absolutely.
final thoughts on play before we tap into our reflection questions?
Gosh, I think we've covered so much. And I just, I don't know that there is, well, I do know there isn't a right answer. There's just the ways that each of us can connect to that hoping and dreaming and balancing all that we experience, both good and bad. And so I hope that this conversation has been helpful for, someone to just think about the ways that their body naturally wants to move or create or grow, as, the opportunity for permission towards some of that space, because there's just such an incredible world out there that we're creating, and to give ourselves permission, just like children know how to, would be just an incredible gift towards these enormous challenges that face us as a society. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share thoughts today.
We're so grateful that you joined us today, Brooke. How can our listeners reach you, and if they wanted to follow you on social media?
So I have a active Instagram account, Start to Begin, and it's start_to_begin, which truly was just about, gosh, I don't know how to have a presence or to do all the things or to be someone. And then the almost falling asleep recognition that if I didn't start, I would never begin. And so it's a daily reflection on where I've found joy or hope or balance. And so that's where I'm most active and would love to have participation and, reflection, because we all grow together in this work.
And speaking of reflections, we like to end our podcast with some reflection questions for our listeners.
So who could you set up a play date with?
What could a good play date look like?
What did you enjoy playing as a kid?
What environment do you feel most playful in?
If no one were watching, what would be fun? If no one would reject you, how would you play? What permission do you need to give yourself to play more?
And so how can you be intentional about incorporating play? And again, thank you so much for joining us, Brooke. For our listeners, please come play with us in nature at our very first Mindful Healers Retreat, Connecting in Nature, coming July 2022. Details will be announced very soon.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or up-level your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely.
Welcome to today's playful mindful moment. A bit of a twist on our usual mindful moment. If possible, find a place that you can lie down and rest in Shavasana. Shavasana is the pose at the end of yoga, corpse pose, where you lie on the floor in complete surrender and relax. So if possible, allow yourself to find a position either on the floor, if that's accessible, lying down completely horizontal, and or in a chair, but in a very relaxed pose. A pose that will allow you to get into that position of relaxation, deep relaxation. And today, as you lie on your mat or sit as relaxed as possible in your chair, in your mind's eye, I want you to picture your yoga mat. as if you were lying on your yoga mat and it were a magic carpet. And can you allow yourself to rest fully on that magic carpet, knowing that it has you protected? And as you lie on it, completely relaxed, completely letting go of all of the energy required to even be, notice that that magic carpet lifts up into the sky. And in your mind's eye, notice what it feels like to be lying on a magic carpet, flying through the sky, kind of like Aladdin. And your magic carpet is flying high up in the clouds. And you feel very safe and secure and relaxed. The magic carpet holding you, floating up into the universe, heading towards a beautiful island. And slowly, that magic carpet lands easily on the sand of that beautiful island. You slowly hear the waves lapping, small waves lapping on the beach. And from here, you can get up off of that magic carpet and begin to explore this beautiful island that you have landed upon, noticing that everything there is green and lush. There are berries, delicious blueberries, blackberries, strawberries on all of the bushes there for picking and enjoying and eating with the juice running down your face. There's a beautiful breeze, perfect temperature. Noticing how amazing the breeze feels on your cheeks. And as you walk and explore, you hear a beautiful river, a brook, with the water, soothing sounds of the water running over the rocks, heading downwards. And there's a beautiful spot under a tree to sit in the shaded, dappled sunshine. You notice your back lean up against the tree and your sit bones connecting to the earth. Listening to the birds singing. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. The temperature is perfect. There's nothing to do, nothing to worry about, nothing to take care of. You allow yourself a moment to just sit and rest back up against the tree. There for you to hold you and allow you to rest. When you're ready, you get up off of the ground and you walk back towards the beach, back towards your yoga mat, your magic carpet. And you lie down on your magic carpet, relaxing fully. Legs extended, arms extended. Noticing that sense of peace within. The sunshine shining on you like a golden light, coming in right towards your heart space, filling up the heart space and chest with a beautiful golden light that spreads outward, letting it fill you with warmth and light and hope and sparkle. And as you lie there, your magic carpet lifts up into the air once again, gliding you easily through the sky, up through the clouds, all the way back into whatever room you happen to be in this moment. And it lands on the floor where you are, or right by the chair where you're sitting. And as you land, you begin to come back into your body, noticing your fingers and your toes, Noticing that golden light still in your chest. Starting to wiggle your fingers and your toes and connecting to the earth underneath you, solid and secure. And taking in a long, deep inhale, stretching your arms long above and your toes long in front, wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers, enjoying the movement. And then gently rolling to one side. If you're seated, you just stay seated, envisioning these movements. Pausing on your side or in your seat to connect to yourself once again. Noticing how you feel after that beautiful journey to a beautiful island with sumptuous and delicious fruit and trees to lean against in the sunshine, rivers, babbling brooks, waves lapping at the edge of the sand. Allow that to seep into you. Notice how good it all feels, the vision of it all, the beauty of it all, the feel of the breeze on your cheeks. One more moment to let that in. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. Come back into the space into which you have been, and just allow yourself a few moments to transition. Noticing that in your mind's eye, when you take a few moments to relax, what fun journeys you can go on if you let your imagination have fun. I hope you enjoyed that journey to the island on your magic carpet. And we hope you'll join us again for a future episode of the Mindful Healers podcast. Have a beautiful and fun week that includes some play, imagination, creativity, and laughter. May you all be well.